The packed audience at SeaWorld watched in horror as a routine performance turned into a nightmare for trainer John Sillick. Without warning, the massive orca lunged, crushing him under its weight and leaving his life hanging by a thread. This brutal attack shook the world, exposing the unpredictable nature of these powerful predators. But this wasn't an isolated incident. Beyond the confines of captivity, orcas are now turning their attention to boats in the wild, leaving sailors terrified and stranded. John Sillick, a talented and dedicated trainer at SeaWorld San Diego, was living his dream. Known for his exceptional skill and calm demeanor, he had spent years forming bonds with the orcas under his care. For Sillick, working with these powerful animals was more than just a job. It was a calling. He admired their intelligence, strength, and grace, and he took immense pride in helping bridge the connection between humans and orcas through SeaWorld's widely popular performances. On a bright and seemingly ordinary day in 1987, SeaWorld was bustling with activity. Families and marine enthusiasts crowded the stadium bleachers, eager to witness the dazzling displays of synchronized jumps, flips, and interactions between trainers and orcas. The sun reflected off the sparkling blue pool as trainers prepped the animals for the show. Among them was John Sillick, dressed in his wetsuit and ready to perform a carefully rehearsed routine with one of the park's star orcas, a massive bull whose presence alone was awe-inspiring. Sillick had performed alongside this orca many times before, and though he was always cautious, he trusted in their mutual understanding, forged through countless training sessions. The show began as planned. The orca glided through the water, responding to Sillick's signals with impressive flips and splashes that delighted the audience. The energy was electric. Children cheered, parents snapped photos, and trainers communicated seamlessly with the animals, creating the illusion of perfect harmony. However, unbeknownst to Sillick and his team, the day was about to take a horrifying turn. During a mid-show routine, Sillick positioned himself at the pool's edge for a trick that required him to interact closely with the massive orca. As he gestured for the orca to approach, the creature's demeanor shifted. In an instant, the calm, cooperative animal transformed. Without warning, the orca surged upward with tremendous force, breaking through the water and lunging towards Sillick. The impact was catastrophic. The orca's immense body collided directly with Sillick, crushing him with unimaginable force. The stadium fell into stunned silence. Gasps rippled through the crowd as they watched Sillick, caught completely off guard, thrown backward into the pool. Trainers nearby froze for a split second before chaos erupted. The scene was one of pure horror. Sillick's body floated in the water, motionless, as the orca circled back. His colleagues sprang into action, shouting commands to the orca in a desperate attempt to regain control. Some trainers scrambled for food buckets, trying to distract the massive animal and coax it away from Sillick. Others shouted for emergency assistance, their voices barely audible over the cries of terrified spectators. Meanwhile, Sillick was gravely injured. The force of the collision had shattered his pelvis, fractured his femur, and broken several ribs. His body, battered and disoriented, struggled to stay afloat as his colleagues pulled him to safety. Lifeguards and emergency personnel rushed to the scene, working frantically to stabilize him before transporting him to the hospital. The attack left SeaWorld reeling. Sillick's injuries were devastating, requiring multiple surgeries, months of grueling rehabilitation, and long-term medical care. For Sillick, the physical pain was only part of the ordeal. The psychological scars ran just as deep. Once confident in his ability to connect with these intelligent creatures, Sillick was left questioning everything he thought he understood about orcas in captivity. The incident shocked the world. While SeaWorld had always emphasized safety measures and the unique bond between trainers and orcas, this attack served as a chilling reminder of the unpredictable power of these animals. At over 12,000 pounds, the orca's sheer size and strength had made it nearly impossible to prevent the attack or mitigate its damage. Trainers who had worked alongside these animals for years were now forced to confront an unsettling reality. Captivity could not erase the primal instincts of wild animals. In the days following the attack, SeaWorld faced intense scrutiny. News of the incident spread rapidly, prompting media outlets, animal rights organizations, and marine biologists to weigh in on the debate surrounding orca captivity. Critics argued that the attack was symptomatic of the psychological and physical toll captivity takes on orcas. These majestic creatures, accustomed to vast, open ocean spaces, were confined to small, artificial tanks, often leading to frustration, aggression, and unpredictable behavior. Tilikum, another infamous orca involved in multiple trainer fatalities years later, became a symbol of the dangers inherent in orca captivity. Like the orca that attacked Sillick, Tillicum's story highlighted the long-term consequences of removing wild animals from their natural habitats and placing them in confined spaces for entertainment. Sillick's harrowing experience added fuel to the growing movement, advocating for the release or better treatment of captive marine mammals. For SeaWorld, the attack served as a wake-up call. Safety protocols were reviewed and revised, with increased precautions to minimize close physical contact between trainers and orcas during performances. Despite these changes, the damage had been done. The public's perception of marine parks began to shift, with many questioning whether the risks to trainers and the well-being of orcas could ever truly be justified. The Shetland Islands, located far to the north of Scotland, are a place of breathtaking beauty. The waters surrounding these rugged isles are pristine and remote, a haven for marine wildlife and a draw for sailors seeking tranquility far from busy shipping lanes. On a quiet morning in June 2023, the crew of a small sailing yacht set out to explore the serene waters of the North Atlantic, unaware that they were about to become part of an extraordinary and terrifying encounter. The crew, comprised of 3 experienced sailors, had spent weeks preparing for this voyage. Their yacht, sturdy and well-maintained, glided effortlessly through the calm waters as the early summer sun glimmered on the waves. The wind was light but steady, and the only sounds were the creak of the mast and the faint calls of seabirds overhead. It was a perfect day, the kind sailors live for, surrounded by nothing but the endless expanse of the sea. The Shetland region was known for its natural beauty and the abundance of marine life that called its waters home. Seals often bobbed curiously beside passing boats, while puffins could be spotted along the rocky coastlines. Orcas, too, were not an uncommon sight, but they were admired from a distance, powerful, majestic predators that had long commanded respect. For the crew, seeing an orca was something they hoped for, a highlight of any voyage. By mid-morning, the yacht was well into open waters. As the crew adjusted the sails and prepared for lunch, one of them spotted something unusual out of the corner of his eye, a dark dorsal fin slicing through the water. At first, there was excitement on deck. "Orca!" someone called, pointing toward the massive black and white figure emerging from the depths. The crew gathered along the rail, cameras in hand, eager to catch a glimpse of the ocean's top predator. However, the excitement quickly turned to unease. The lone orca wasn't passing by. It was moving deliberately toward the yacht, its dorsal fin cutting a straight path through the calm water. One sailor muttered uneasily, "It's getting too close." The crew watched in stunned silence as the orca surfaced just yards from the boat, its sleek form breaking the surface with an audible splash. The impact was sudden and jarring, as though the boat had collided with a submerged rock. The entire yacht shuddered violently, and the crew staggered to maintain their footing. "What the hell was that?" shouted the skipper, scrambling to check the controls. Before anyone could process what had happened, the orca struck again, this time ramming the hull with even greater force. The sound reverberated through the boat, a deep, unsettling thud that made the crew's hearts pound. Panic began to set in. The skipper shouted orders, trying to get the yacht to move, but the orca was relentless. It circled the vessel methodically, disappearing beneath the surface before slamming into the hull again. The yacht creaked under the repeated blows, the fiberglass groaning ominously. Water sloshed onto the deck as the crew scrambled to assess the damage. "Check the rudder!" one of the crew yelled, peering over the stern. To their horror, they saw the orca focusing its attacks on the rudder, striking it with its powerful body. The crew now understood what was happening. This was no accident or playful encounter. The orca was deliberately targeting the yacht's steering, just as other attacks in southern waters had been reported. But this was new. This was northern waters, a place where orcas had never been known to display such aggression. The skipper tried to steer the boat away, but the damage was taking its toll. The rudder groaned and splintered under the orca's repeated strikes, rendering the yacht increasingly unresponsive. "We're losing control!" someone shouted. Adrenaline coursed through the crew as they braced for the next strike. Each impact rocked the yacht, sending tremors through their bodies and forcing them to hold on for dear life. For what felt like an eternity, the orca continued its assault. The crew's fear was palpable. Here they were, miles from shore, stranded in the path of one of the ocean's most powerful predators. The once calm and idyllic voyage had turned into a nightmare, and the open water that had once offered peace now felt vast, unforgiving, and inescapable. Finally, after nearly 20 minutes of relentless attacks, the orca seemed to lose interest. It surfaced one last time beside the yacht, its massive body gliding eerily close as if inspecting its handiwork. Then, with a final flick of its tail, it disappeared into the depths. The water was calm again, but the crew was far from at ease. The damage was severe. The rudder was nearly destroyed, and the hull had sustained several cracks. The yacht was no longer seaworthy, and the crew realized they needed help. They radioed for assistance, sending out a distress call to the nearest Coast Guard station. Hours later, a rescue vessel arrived, towing the damaged yacht back toward safety. The crew, though physically unharmed, were visibly shaken. As news of the attack spread, marine biologists and researchers were stunned. This incident marked the first recorded orca attack in northern waters, a significant and alarming development. Previously, similar behaviors had been confined to orca populations off the coasts of Spain, Portugal, and Morocco. The Shetland Islands, so far north, had never seen anything like it. Scientists speculated that the orca's behavior could have been influenced by stress, territorial instincts, or even learned behaviors passed down from other pods. The Moroccan coastline near Cape Spartel, where the Atlantic meets the Mediterranean, is renowned for its breathtaking beauty and maritime significance. Known as a historical waypoint for sailors traveling between Europe and Africa, the waters near Cape Spartel are often tranquil and dotted with vessels navigating one of the world's busiest maritime routes. On May 2023, a group of experienced sailors aboard a private yacht set out for a seemingly routine voyage along the Moroccan coast. Little did they know, this day would take a harrowing and life-threatening turn. The day had started with perfect sailing weather. The crew of 4 had been on a long journey, relishing the open sea and the calm rhythms of the waves. Their yacht, a sturdy and well-equipped vessel, glided effortlessly through the blue waters as the sun hovered just above the horizon. They were a few miles off Cape Spartel, comfortably isolated from heavy boat traffic, and the soft winds carried an air of serenity. The mood on deck was cheerful. The crew enjoyed casual conversation, with one member taking the helm while the others prepared meals and checked the yacht's systems. The sea was still, the kind of quiet that often lulls sailors into a sense of ease, until the silence was shattered. It began with a distant splash, followed by the unmistakable sight of dark dorsal fins slicing through the water. One sailor spotted the movement first and called out, his voice tinged with both excitement and apprehension. "Orcas!" he shouted. At first, the sight was awe-inspiring. A pod of 6 orcas approached the yacht, swimming in tight formation with astonishing speed. Seeing such creatures up close felt like a gift from the ocean, a rare moment sailors often consider a blessing. But something was off. The orcas weren't just passing by. They were closing in, fast. Before the crew could process what was happening, the first impact hit. The yacht shuddered violently as an orca rammed its rudder with full force, sending a loud, deep thud reverberating through the hull. "What was that?" yelled the helmsman, spinning the wheel in an attempt to steady the vessel. Another collision followed, harder this time, knocking one sailor off balance and sending equipment clattering across the deck. The pod, now circling the yacht like hunters stalking prey, moved with deliberate and unnerving precision. The orcas targeted the rudder and hull, striking with terrifying accuracy. "They're attacking us!" one sailor screamed, panic beginning to rise as the yacht rocked under the repeated blows. The rudder, the heart of the yacht's steering system, was under siege. The helmsman quickly realized that control of the vessel was slipping away. With each strike, the yacht became harder to maneuver, and the steering wheel turned uselessly in his hands. Desperation set in as the crew scrambled to respond. One sailor rushed to inspect the damage, peering over the stern where the rudder was located. His face paled at what he saw. The orcas were ramming the rudder repeatedly, their massive bodies rising out of the water with startling power before crashing back down. Each collision sent tremors through the yacht, and the rudder, now splintering under the force, was on the verge of snapping entirely. "They're breaking it apart," the sailor shouted, his voice barely audible over the chaos. The crew quickly debated their options, but they were out of ideas. The engines were failing, the rudder was crippled, and there was no way to steer the vessel to safety. They were stranded in open water, at the mercy of a group of apex predators whose motives were impossible to understand. The attacks continued for over an hour. The orcas showed no signs of stopping, circling back again and again to deliver blows to the yacht. The crew's desperation turned into exhaustion as they tried to mitigate the damage, sending out distress calls over the radio in the hope that someone, anyone, would hear them. Finally, a distant vessel responded. A nearby cargo ship, alerted to the yacht's distress, began making its way toward them. The crew clung to whatever hope they could find as the large ship loomed closer on the horizon. The approaching vessel seemed to startle the orcas, who began to retreat. Slowly, the pod dispersed, their dark fins sinking below the waves as quickly as they had appeared. Relief washed over the crew, but the danger was far from over. The yacht was severely damaged, its rudder almost destroyed, and water had begun seeping into the lower decks. The cargo ship relayed the crew's position to Moroccan maritime authorities, who sent a rescue vessel to tow the stricken yacht back to shore. As the crew waited to be rescued, they sat in stunned silence, still trying to comprehend the ordeal they had just survived. Hours later, the yacht was safely towed to the nearest marina, but the physical damage was staggering. The rudder would need to be replaced entirely, and the hull showed deep structural fractures that would require extensive repairs. The emotional toll on the crew was equally profound. "It was like nothing I've ever seen," one sailor later recounted. "They weren't just playing, they were deliberate. It was terrifying." If you enjoyed this video, watch our next one shown on screen.